that the MRT-3 is not for sale. DOTR Secretary Jaime Bautista clarified that only the rail line's O&M or operations and maintenance are being considered for privatization.
The government has signed 2 more contract packages on civil works for the Metro Manila Subway project. These are for subway stations along Quezon Avenue as well as in Anonas and Camp Aguinaldo.
And thousands of high-earning Filipino seafarers in Europe are said to be at risk of losing their jobs because of the poor quality training in the maritime industry.
We should not be alarmed by this, no? Because we did not fail the audit. No? There were findings, there were observations, but the Philippine government through Marina, through CHED, the Department of Migrant Workers, DOLE, and the Coast Guards are working together to address all these issues. No?
The Transportation Department makes it clear MRT-3 is not for sale. While the DOTR is open to the idea of a private company handling maintenance and operations, it says it is not giving up full control of the train system. What could partial privatization do to MRT-3? We discuss in this episode of The Chiefs. Welcome to the Thursday edition of The Chiefs. I'm Ed Lingao. Online from Manila, joining us is Pamintuan of the Philippine Star. Ami, magandang gabi at happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday.
What's your banner story for tomorrow?
Hindi naman banner, pero interesado siguro yung mga tao na next year wala na namang traslasyon. Sinabi na ng Quiapo Church as a precaution against COVID. Saka siyempre malaking balita yung no? Maganda yung takbo ng ekonomiya natin because of the reopening.
Third quarter.
Lumakas na ang consumption, 7.6%, slightly higher than expected ng government. So, good Thursday.
Although, that's also interesting when you look at it. Kasi, I suppose parang ang chicken and the egg yan. It was basically growth via consumption or spending.
Lagi naman tayo kasing consumption-driven yung
but spending drives up inflation.
Anong problema nga?
And inflation...
And considering what's happening around the world, medyo delikado. Masasakit na ulo ng Bangko Sentral niyan kung ano gagawin niya.
And in the end, inflation might just temper spending. So it may just go full circle. And remember, ang sabi ng ibang analyst na kausap natin in the past week or two, we're looking at the possibility of inflation hitting what 9%, 9.1%, 9.3% by December.
Well, hindi pa siguro mag-slow down ang consumption because magpapasko Alam mo naman dito, kahit maubos yung sweldo, basta maligayang Pasko.
Pinoy na Pinoy ba? Pinoy na Pinoy ba?
Kaya yung inflation lang ang problema.
Yeah, and that will remain a problem. And then, of course, the other story is, which we will also talk about in a while, turned out to be, the murmur on the shore.
Malakas pa rin sa House, pero yung sa Senate, baka malakas,
the Senate is still a toss-up. We won't know until next month kasi may runoff pa doon sa, I think, Georgia, tapos hindi pa called yung Arizona and yung Nevada. Tapos dun sa House, sa US House, well, yes, the Republicans have gained control of the House, but it's not as big a margin as they expected or they projected.
Kaya pwedeng ma-comfort po rin ng Democrats yung Senate.
On the other hand, what that could also mean is more acrimony and more debate and more divisiveness in both chambers of Congress kasi walang malinaw na may malakas na majority. So you might end up looking at more stalemates, especially in the budget or the legislative agenda. But anyway, we'll talk about that in the second half of the show. For the first half of the show, we will talk to the Transportation Secretary, Secretary Bautista. But we will first take a break, so please stay with us.
Under niyo ba yung road tolls? Mga toll rates sa isa inyo.
15 seconds po.
And welcome back to the Chiefs. A lawmaker suggests the privatization of MRT3 to improve, she says, the operation of the train system. Our first guest does not believe this is necessary. And joining us via Zoom is Department of Transportation Secretary Jaime Bautista. Sir, magandang gabi and welcome to the Chiefs.
Hi, good evening, Ed. Good evening, Ami.
Good evening po.
Good evening, sir. Thank you for joining us tonight. We appreciate your taking the time to join us tonight in this show. Sir, I think you've made it clear. The government is not ready to give up full control of MRT3. But si Senator Po is citing other examples in other countries. Sabi niya, it's shown itself to be more efficient if you privatize these public utilities, more seamless daw, and so on down the line. What do you think po? What do you say to that?
Ed, what we're thinking of is privatizing the maintenance and operations of MRT3. No? We're not really looking at selling the whole assets of MRT3 because it will not be attractive for the private sector to invest a huge amount of money for them to own the assets of MRT3. No? So just like LRT1, which was constructed by the government 40 years ago, it's now being operated by the private sector. No? And we see that they are doing it efficiently. No? They take good care of maintenance of the trains and the other system of LRT1. No? So that's what we're looking at when the MRT3 is turned over to the government in 2025.
Sir, so what you're saying, sir, tell me if I'm getting this right. What you're saying is basically is it's not that we don't want to privatize MRT3. It's also because we can't do it to begin with because nobody will buy it at this point.
That's right, Ed. No? The government has invested billions of pesos, no? And I don't think the private sector is willing to invest that amount because it will be very difficult for them to recover the whole amount during the time that we will enter into a concession agreement with them. No? So what we're looking at is an efficient maintenance and operations by the private sector of MRT3.
Is that what you call the partial privatization? Ganun ba yan?
Hindi naman, no. It's because privatization can be done through extension of the concession agreement, no, to the private sector. No? Just like other projects, the government will enter into a concession agreement with the private sector for a certain number of years, and then after that, the operations will be again turned over to the government, and it's up to government to again enter into a concession agreement with the same party or with another party.
There's a report that the MRT is losing money. Kumusta ba yung financial situation naman?
Well, alam niyo po talaga pong nalulugi ang MRT3 ngayon, no? Because the maintenance cost is quite high, no? And even if the private sector will operate it and assume the other operating expenses like fixed expenses, considering that you have to depreciate the asset, no? It will be very difficult for them to make MRT3 profitable, no? Kaya po, alam niyo po, sa buong mundo, ang mga train system ay talagang sinusuportahan ng gobyerno, no? There is subsidy, no? And it's really the private sector who will do an operations and maintenance so that they can also recover these expenses by collecting fares from the passengers. No? In fact po, sa other countries, no, for example, in Hong Kong, the operations of MTR is not really making money, but they make money on their investments sa mga real estate. No? So, sa ibang bansa, ganun din po. No? Sa Japan, ang kumikita dyan talaga yung mga investments nila sa real estate. No? Because part of their investment is they construct buildings, no? They lease these buildings, no? And they support the operations of the rails, no? In other countries.
Sir,
Wala ba kayong-
go ahead, Dami.
wala ba kayong balak na gawin din yun for our rail services? Kasi I know I've traveled also. Ganun nga yung sitwasyon, di ba? Maraming mga kiosk, dun sa mga subs, sa mga hubs ng transport. Wala ba kayong balak na gano'n? O kaya pa ba natin mag-invest sa ganong setup?
Ngayon po, medyo siguro hindi na po makakapag-invest ang gobyerno doon sa mga real estate na yan. No? Hindi katulad po ng ibang bansa, no? From the very start, they already invested in real estate. No? Tayo, hindi tayo bumili ng mga assets sa tabi ng mga riles natin. No? And because of that, talagang ang itasahan lang natin ay yung revenue natin from the operations of the trains. No?
Yes, sir. Sir, earlier you cited the case of the LRT Line 1, which I understand is privately operated by the Light Rail Manila Corporation or LRMC. And I'm wondering lang, sir, and I asked this because I really don't know. Ano pong kaibahan ng dalawang yon, ng LRT1 versus MRT3? Na yung MRT3 hindi kumikita, pero I suppose yung LRT1 kumikita siya if the private operator is still maintaining it. What's the difference between the two, and what makes one, if at all, more profitable than the other?
Yung MRT3 po, it is a build, lease, and transfer arrangement with a group of conglomerates. No? These conglomerates finance the construction of the MRT3. No? And the government is paying a lease, no, to this group. No? Yun lang pong lease na binabayad dyan ay napakalaki. No?
Okay.
And kung yan ay babayaran ng private sector, ay talagang hindi po kayang patakbuhin ang MRT3. Kaya ngayon po ang nagbabayad niyan ay ang government. No? And 3 years from now, bayad na po yung buong system na yan. No? And pwede nang i-turn over yan sa private sector. They will operate, they will maintain, no? And hindi na po sila magbabayad nitong mga list na to. No? Kasi yan po ang pinakamalaking expense dyan, yung pagbili or paggawa ng infrastructure ng MRT3. No?
Yes, sir. So, sir, is that the direction you're looking at in the next 3 years? MRT3 also to be privately operated?
Well, yan po ang tinitingnan namin, no? Para magaya natin yung ginawa ng gobyerno doon sa LRT1. No? Yung LRT1 po, ginawa yan 40 years ago. No? Nabayaran na yung mga utang na kinuha ng gobyerno pang pagawa nitong LRT1. And because of that, ang magiging gastos na lang ng private sector, yung operations and maintenance. No? Wala na po yung malaking pagbabayad ng lease, pagbabayad ng utang. No? Kaya pwede hong i-take over yan ng private sector. No?
Secretary, medyo matagal na din itong mga usapin na you're planning to privatize nga. Meron na ba kayong na-receive na feelers from any private group na interesado, considering na medyo hindi nga sa profitable?
Well, sa ngayon po, meron naman palagay ko na magiging interesado. No? Although sa ngayon wala po talaga pang lumalapit sa amin. No? Kasi mga 3 taon pa po yan bago namin magawa ang privatization, no, ng MRT3.
Well, speaking of privatization, you also mentioned in a forum na you are considering privatizing the EDSA bus carousel. Can you expound on this? At matutuloy kaya?
Well, yung pong EDSA bus carousel, no, meron ngayon diyang around 500 buses, no, that run the line, no? Ang pwede po nating gawin dyan ay magkaroon ng isang private sector group na sila na lang ang mag-ooperate ng lahat ng buses, no? And at the same time, pwede po nilang i-improve yung mga bus stop, yung mga station, no? Ihiwalay natin yung station doon sa MRT3 kasi po ngayon yung mga stations ay ginagamit natin yung mga facilities ng MRT3.
Yes, sir.
So, ang pwede natin gawin ay the private sector will invest in new stations, no? Medyo ilalayo natin sa MRT3 para hindi siya nakikipag-compete sa MRT3 and binibigyan natin ng other options yung mga pasahero natin, no? For example po, instead na yung pasahero natin sa isang station na nasa MRT3, doon magkakaroon tayo ng station na medyo mas malayo konti, no, para hindi masyadong malayo yung nilalakaran ng mga pasahero natin.
Pero sir, will the carousel be profitable enough for the private sector to want to be part of it to begin with?
Alam mo, pwede pong maging profitable, no? Kasi kung yung private sector, what they can do is they can form one group, no? Siguro ngayon kasi merong mga groups na nag-ooperate diyan, no? Na pwedeng pagsama-samahin nila yung kanilang mga assets, no? Yung mga bus operators ngayon can be the stockholders of this new company, no? So they will not compete with each other, no? And at the same time, makakasingil po sila ng medyo mas magandang fares, no? They can be more efficient, no, pag walang competition, no? Kasi po pag nag-operate sila as one, pwedeng bumaba yung kanilang expenses in terms of maintenance, in terms of training. They can be more efficient, no? So posible po kasi sa ibang bansa profitable po yung busway, no? So pwede natin gawin yan dito sa Pilipinas.
Yes, sir. Although, sir, I don't know lang how this applies here. Pero yung mahirap kasi minsan daw yung pagbabalanse between the need for a utility to recoup expenses versus yung needs ng consumers or yung commuters to be able to afford yung fares. So sometimes, and then that's when it becomes political. So decisions have to be made by, for example, government to subsidize or to shell out money to lower the fares. Would that be a problem with, for example, MRT3 or the bus carousel if it comes to a point where they are operated by the private sector?
Well, posible po, no? Kasi for example, doon po sa LRT1, no? There is a provision there doon sa concession agreement that they can raise their fares every 2 years, no? Na pag hindi naman pinayagan ng gobyerno, parang the government has to subsidize it kasi malulugi sila, no? So posible po na magkaroon din ng subsidy ang gobyerno para masuportahan ang operations nitong EDSA carousel or ng MRT3 or L1, no?
Secretary, sa railways pa rin, the government has been negotiating with China loan agreements for 3 major railways. Tuloy po ba yan? Are you still pursuing it?
Well, yung pong project, itutuloy pa rin po natin, no? Ito po yung tinatawag na natin na Bicol Long Haul, no? Yung pong Mindanao Railway at saka yung freight train from Clark to Subic, no? Maganda pong ituloy yan, no? Kung hindi tayo makakuha ng loan from China, pwede po tayong kumausap ng iba namang magpo-provide ng loan, no? For example po, yung freight line, no, from Clark to Subic, no? Merong other countries na interested to support it, no?
Yun ang Mindanao Railway Phase 1, no? Ang balak partial operation na by 2027 and full operation by 2028 Phase 1. On track ba yan, yung schedule na yan?
Well, ngayon po wala pa yung loan nito, no? So hihintayin muna natin na magkaroon tayo ng loan to support the construction of this Mindanao Railway. No? So the moment po na magkaroon tayo ng clear indication, magkakaroon ng loan, no? Pwede po nating simulan na rin itong project na to. No? Kasi po ngayon, we're looking at now buying real the line po, no, yung tinatawag natin na right of way, no. So we're actively pursuing it po.
Yes, sir. But sir, has Beijing given any indication that it is still interested in providing these loans? Kasi, you know, it was a big thing in 2016 when they announced it, and yun nga, it fizzled out by 2021. And now the question, like you said nga, we're pursuing discussions on these, but ano pong indicator so far from Beijing?
Well, actually po, nag-uusap na po ang Department of Finance at ang China, no? Although sa ngayon ay nasa discussion phase pa lang po sila, no?
Was it clear, sir, kung ano yung naging problema to begin with at least nung nakaraang administration, bakit hindi siya natuloy? Was it ever made clear?
Ang isa pong reason ay hindi tinanggap ng gobyerno natin yung interest rate na ino-offer ng China, no? Medyo natatasan po yung gobyerno natin, no?
Okay.
Gusto po nila 10%, no? And right now, I think China is open for a lower interest rate. No?
Sir, how much was China asking for then? I missed I missed what you said.
Nanghihingi po sila ng 3% interest
3%.
rate. No?
Okay.
So, ang position naman ng Philippine government during that time, dapat mas mababa dahil ang nakukuha nating loan sa Japan ay mas mababa.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Well, speaking of Japan, they're funding the subway project, our first, which you launched only recently. Kumusta? May mga early problems ba na na-encounter with the construction?
Well, meron pong ang mga problema po natin dyan really are yung problem sa right of way. No? Although marami naman pong tumutulong sa atin, no? Ang Office of the Solicitor General is helping us, no? Na maayos yung mga expropriation cases, no? Basically, yung po ang isa sa mga problem natin, no? Although we're expecting that the boring machine will start operating by early December po.
Ano pag hindi na-resolve yung mga right of way, iikutan ba yung mga under... It's pretty deep, ha? Malalim na malalim yan, eh. Aabot pa rin ba yung mga building?
Hindi po, we're very confident na we will be able to solve this right of way issues po. Kasi babayaran naman ng gobyerno yung mga maaapektuhan, eh, no? So it's a matter of negotiating with the owners po.
Okay. So on track tayo, ha, schedule ng subway. Excited na mga tao sa first subway.
Okay. Sir, pahabol na lang, sir. Yung libreng sakay, kamusta? I understand, di ba, hanggang katapusan ng taon yon, pero after that, wala talaga, wala talaga extension.
Well, yung libreng sakay po, end of the year na lang talaga, no? Wala po tayong pang budget to extend the libreng sakay, no?
What about yung ride sa kasi tinatanong ng mga tao, I know sinagot na to ng mga transport officials, no? Sabi nila hindi daw i-extend yung operating hours ng mga railway lines. Dahil yung mag-iiba yung schedule ng mga malls, aabot sila ng +11. Hindi na ba magbabago isip nyo to extend the operating hours? Wala daw masasakyan yung mga tao, yung both consumers and workers in the malls.
Actually po, meron naman, no? Yung EDSA carousel natin, it's operating 24 hours po, no? Although, yung libreng sakay is hanggang 11 o'clock lang, no? From 4 to 11. Yung 11 to 4, meron na pong bayad dyan, no? Pero almost 24 hours din naman na operations ng ating libreng sakay, no?
Okay. Transportation...
Pahabol ko lang yung
Go ahead.
Teka muna.
Good.
Pahabol ko lang yung change topic, transportation pa rin. Yung problema natin with our seafarers, yung accreditation, kumusta yung progress? I know sa early next year pa yung deadline natin actually. But so far, ano yung mga reforms na ini-implement na?
Well, yung pong problem natin with the seafarers is that nagkaroon ng assessment ang European Maritime Safety Agency, no? In 2020, meron silang mga nakitang findings, no? And yun po ay umabot sa 23, tawag nila 23 grievances, no? Although from 2006 po, dati 100 plus yan, no? Na-address naman na yan ng previous government, naging 40, naging 6, tapos naging 53 ngayon, no? But ito po ay ina-address namin, no? Basically po ang problema natin ay problem sa training, education, no? And kasi po yung meron pong mga schools, no, maritime schools na hindi nila talaga nagagawa yung dapat na ituro, no? Kaya po ang Marina, ang CHED ay naghihigpit, tinitingnan nila na dapat yung pagtuturo nila is in accordance with the standards, no? Ganon din po yung tinatawag natin na onboarding, no? Kasi after sa mga school classroom training, kailangan magkaroon ng on-the-job training, no? So yun po ang meron tayong konting pagkukulang, no? Ganon din po yung mga equipments na dapat ginagamit sa school, no? Meron pagkukulang yung mga ibang schools, kaya naghihigpit ngayon yung CHED, no? At ang Marina ay tumutulong sa CHED para ma-inspect po yung mga maritime school natin, no? Ang Coast Guard naman, tinutulungan nila yung mga onboard trainees, no? Sinisigurado nila na nandun nga yung mga trainees, kasi po in the past nagkakaroon ng record na merong training pero actually wala pong sumasakay na. Pero ngayon, yan ang mga findings natin, no? So ngayon, nag-ipit na tayo, and yan po ay bibigyan namin ng updates ang European Union doon sa mga action items na ginagawa.
Gusto daw ni President Marcos ng ladderized system of training. Patutuloy kaya yan?
Well, opo. Yan po ang pinagtutuunan ng pansin ngayon ng CHED at ng Marina, no?
Okay. Transportation Secretary Jaime Bautista, sir, magandang gabi sa inyo at maraming salamat for joining us tonight, and we hope to have you again.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Secretary.
Thank you, Ami.
Ingat, sir.
Good evening.
We are starting up another conversation right after this break, so please stay with the Chiefs.
former U.S. President Donald Trump hailed the success of the Republican Party in this year's U.S. midterm elections. Republicans are expected to take control of the U.S. House of Representatives after flipping 5 Democratic seats based on early returns.
The main takeaway is that there was a red wave last night, but it started in Florida and it ended in Florida. That's really all we got.
While the press and the pundits are predicting a giant red wave, it didn't happen. And I know you were somewhat miffed by my obsessive optimism, but I felt good during the whole process.
Over in the U.S., Democrats and Republicans are in a tight race for Congress supremacy. How will the results of the midterm elections affect the world, especially the Philippines? We speak again to geopolitical expert and academic Richard Heydarian, who joins us live here in the studio.
Finally!
Yeah, magandang gabi.
Naging co-host na. Nag-self-upgrade na ako. It's good to be here.
Welcome to the Chiefs. Si Ami, naka-zoom lang. Oh, ikaw, nandito ka.
Kamusta? Sorry naka-ano na ako.
Isolation ako.
I came out of the screen.
Hindi, nasa trabaho talaga si Ami. She's not closing. She's closing the page. But anyway, okay. Very basic question. People were saying, people were expecting the red tide or red wave. And although the Republicans have gained the majority in the lower chamber, it's not as much as was expected. What happened? Parang where did the red wave go?
Yeah, actually, interestingly, 3-4 months ago, may poll ang New York Times, which was suggesting that because of the Roe versus Wade case, kung saan the abortion rights were overturned, the expectation was the college-educated white Americans, Caucasian Americans, and suburban women will rally behind Democrats. Therefore, the Democrats will do much better than expected. And then, the most recent polls naman sinasabi na inflation is a big issue. Apparently, what ended up is, depending on what state we're talking about, one of those became the dominant picture. So in some states, ang naging big issue pa rin yung democracy, abortion rights, etc. rights. And then the other hand, may mga estado kung saan, culture wars, anti-liberal arguments, pro-Trumpian ideas, and especially inflation became more important issue. So there was no national wave. There were waves on the level of the state, depending on what was the dominant discourse in that state.
All over
exactly.
The country.
So it's like an ocean with different directions rather than one big wave all across the ocean, right? So yun ang nangyari. Kaya nga hindi nakuha ng mga polls very accurately. But the other reason is that you would always expect, because hindi katulad ng Pilipinas. Diba sa Pilipinas, parati pro-incumbent yung mga midterm elections kasi may advantage
Super
ka.
majority o ano.
Baliktad ng Amerika, dahil ayaw ng mga Amerikano na masyadong concentrated ng power in one party, they tend to vote against the incumbent.
Pag midterm elections,
Especially, yeah. So Trump lost 40 seats plus, Obama 50 seats plus, Clinton 60 seats plus. So the expectation was, because Biden is super low approval, 40% barely, there's just no way that he's not going to be shellacked. Again, I'm going to use the term, diba? So the red wave was like the common sense based on the historical trends, right? And American political psychology. Well, guess what? This year was completely special again. We saw a new unprecedented situation whereby people were voting about what they felt was the most existential threat to America, whether it was threat to democracy and abortion rights, women rights, or they felt it's the mishandling of the economy, inflation, etc. Kaya nakita natin itong outcome. So, ironically, once again, Uncle Joe Biden defied all critics. In 2020, he had a kind of an interview with New York Times and he said, hindi pa ako patay and I'm not gonna die anytime soon. Kasi people keep on counting him out. Saying
it's actually funny, they lost the House, pero he's saying it was a good day.
Yeah, because it's gonna be, kasi kung masyadong close yung fight, mahirapan yung mga Republicans to completely dominate all the committees.
Well, let's bring in Ami.
Right,
Ami,
yeah.
sorry. We're not pala.
Sure, Ami, yeah.
Because it's not a tsunami, it's just the ripples. no?
Exactly.
Si Biden ngayon, it's very optimistic that the Democrats might actually get to control the Senate.
Yep.
Tama ba yun? Is that over-optimistic?
So malalaman lang natin yan next month. So Georgia once again will be very, very big. If Nevada and Arizona, so there are 3 states left, no? Arizona, Nevada, and Georgia. Georgia, clear na walang nanalo ng 50%, so it's going to go for a runoff. Once again, Georgia will be a big one. But if Republicans get both Nevada and Arizona, I think medyo tapos ng laban. No? But if they go split, Arizona goes to, let's say, Democrats and Nevada goes to Republicans, then I think it really goes down to Georgia, which everyone's expecting. Pero bati dun sa congressional fights, kasi 400 seats yan eh.
Yeah.
We won't also know the results in many, many states for days, if not weeks to come. So, baka abutan tayo talaga ng end of the year bago natin malaman what's going to be the fate of the U.S. Congress. It's going to hang in the balance, which ironically is a good thing for Democrats because they were expecting they'll totally lose that. And let's not forget, there's a big factor. The U.S. Supreme Court is now very conservative. So maybe it's also possible na sinasabi ng mga ibang Amerikano na, yes, the president is Democrat, but if the Supreme Court is more conservative, then maybe we should not go pro-Republican per se in the Congress. Because in the past, that's not the case. Medyo mas balancing Supreme Court. But because Trump was able to railroad three Supreme Court justices, it has completely changed the dynamics of the overall American checks and balances system.
But is it safe to say na walang party na nagkaroon ng significant majority in this election?
Yeah, I think Amy also has a question. Yes, Amy.
No, so what will be the impact on the Philippines kung sakaling
Pag-usapan
both
natin.
chambers parehong, or kung makapasok ang mga Democrats sa Senate?
Yeah.
Or
Right.
will there be a difference at all?
Yeah, I mean, marami, no? I mean, it may not be as apparent, but unang-una, wag natin kalimutan, noong 2013, si President Obama hindi nakapunta sa mga, I think, Asian-ASEAN summits dahil nagkaroon ng shutdown yung government nila sa sobrang toxic yung mga awayan doon sa loob ng Kongreso because it was totally Republican, right? He lost it. So, clearly, my correlation between domestic mess and the ability of American presidents to responsibly project power and support us. Aliada tayo ng Amerika. So kung medyo unstable, dysfunctional America internally, they're not going to be the very reliable ally we need them to be, no? At the same time, kung super divided yung House, kasi balance, it doesn't mean na kung Republicans hawak isa at Democrats yung isa, may magandang balance. No, it could be complete dysfunction, right? And kung may dysfunction in America, how are they going to compete with China? How are they going to make decisions on helping the Philippines, on good governance, on AFP modernization, on West Philippine Sea, on Taiwan, right? So, gusto mo sana yung isang situation kung saan there's sufficient power by each side so that they are forced to work together.
Yeah.
But if there's complete imbalance, right, even though it looks like balance on the surface, then U.S. will not be able to project power. The second one is, of course, the ideological, psychological momentum. Sa Brazil, just the other week, natalo ang authoritarian populist na si Bolsonaro, and Lula was able to pull off a very slim victory, no? Because he built a coalition with liberals and progressives. So in the U.S., we see Democrats also doing pretty okay because they have a wide coalition. So for me, I think the lesson is very big. So for Filipino liberals, progressives who feel that, you know, they don't know about where the Philippines is going, maybe they can also get lessons and inspiration from Democrats who did well. So one person I want to emphasize is Fetterman, who just won the Senate race and flipped Pennsylvania, which has been controlled by the Republicans since 2010, no? What is he? Look at it. Sa isang banda, he's very progressive, more like Bernie Sanders than Biden. But on the other hand, folksy siya. He can speak the language of people. He's a Harvard Law graduate, but he doesn't speak like a Harvard Law graduate. He dresses up like an ordinary Joe, right? Average Joe. So I think that's also a role model, that kind of an archetype that can work everywhere, including the Philippines. Siguro, if you want to fight for democracy and progressive values, wag kang mag-English lang, or wag kang mag-highfalutin. Maybe you have to speak and embody your convictions in a way that is relatable sa masa. So for me, despite the big differences between U.S. and the Philippines, I think there are lessons we can learn from there. And lastly, of course, if the more extreme Republicans had won and controlled the Congress, you can imagine there could be even more gridlock, and who knows what kind of extreme policies that could come in, which could adversely affect Filipino Americans, because at the end of the day, our relatives, Filipinos, are minorities. And let's be honest, far-right ideas are less amenable to them and less helpful to them than, let's say, progressive ideals, right? I don't want to be biased, but let's just be real about it.
So that's what you mean when you talk about dysfunction, you're referring to gridlock and stalemates where government practically grinds to a halt, or there is no decision that is clearly made.
Yeah, and actually what I'm watching for is almost certainly manalong Republicans sa Congress. I mean, the lower house, no? The Senate, I don't know. But I just don't know the margins, maybe 2-1. So ang tanong is, who will get the committee chairmanships? Now, they are super extreme candidates, like Marjorie Taylor. I mean, mga ganun, like, like, who are like, but she might get a committee
She might get a committee?
or she might get a top position
that's
in a committee. You get what I'm saying? And that will have huge implications about what's going to happen in the Congress. So, ang tanong dito is, hindi lang anong partido magkokontrol, anong paksyon sa loob ng anong partido magkontrol
Kasi may spectrum
ng
din
anong
yan.
committees. So, actually, ang ginagawa namin ngayon, I mean, I'm watching the tweets, message from friends in DC is, anong magiging committee allotments? Kasi kung some of the more extreme QAnon people make it to the top committees,
Marjorie Taylor Greene.
it could make Ways and Means, Foreign Affairs. Then who knows what's going to happen in the US, right?
Sorry, we're...
Yeah.
Ami.
Balik ko pa rin sa Pilipinas, will there be an impact on the relations between Washington and the Marcos administration?
Yeah.
Whether Democrat or Republican ang manalo, anong impact?
Right.
Meron ba?
I think this is where I don't want to use the word praise, but I think this is where we have to give credit where credit is due to President Marcos Jr., who I think has a very effective, let's just call it balanced multi-vector strategy, which will appeal to any party, whether Trump, whether Biden, whether DeSantis, whether Kamala Harris. I think anyone can work with Marcos Jr. because Marcos Jr. has presented himself as a statesman who can work with any American administration because his fundamental concern is to have a strong alliance that benefits the Philippines. It's very different from the previous Filipino presidents, right? Some of them were much closer to the U.S. and Democrats in particular, right? Rather than Republicans. And while on the other hand, President Duterte was a sui generis, but very close to China, very comfortable with Trump, never met Biden in person, and cost at Obama, right? But Marcos is not necessarily just good with Democrats. I think he can work with Republicans and Democrats, and he's not a liberal himself. He's a kind of pragmatist centrist kind of candidate. So I think that's the good thing is because of the balanced relations foreign policy strategy of President Marcos Jr., we will be in a good position to have robust relations with any president. Pero that's just our side of the equation. Ang thing ko is, even if we have the best relations with the US, pero dysfunctional yung US, unpredictable yung presidente nila, wala rin saysay yan. So mahalaga din para sa atin na makita natin isang malakas na Amerika na coherent ang direction, maganda yung foreign policy in ways that they can become reliable ally to us. Because my fear is, if US is divided and dysfunctional, that will encourage China. That will encourage Russia. We know, for instance, that Trump is very comfortable with Putin. We know, for instance, that many Republicans are pushing for reduction of aid to Ukraine if they take over. That's why we're watching what's happening. And if Ukraine doesn't get support, Taiwan is going to be scared. If Taiwan is going to get scared, it's going to affect China. Well, guess what? We're next to Taiwan. Do you get what I'm saying? Lahat yan connected yan eh. So while I agree that in terms of personal rapport, I think Marcos Jr. can work with either Trump, DeSantis, Biden, whoever. The fact of the matter is that it mahalaga din anong klaseng presidente ang meron sa Amerika at anong klaseng internal politics na meron sila because malaking impact ito pagdating sa American networks of alliances and posturing dito sa part of our world. Yeah.
But the presidential election is still 2 years away.
Sure.
In the meantime, in the next 2 years, may linaw ba kung ano yung ano yung epekto sa atin kung Republican or Democrat controlled yung Congress tsaka yung Senate?
My sense is, of course, if Democrats keep on doing well, meaning they'll win again in 2024 and somehow hold on to Senate, etc., I won't be surprised that down the road, maybe America will be much more focused. Remember, one thing that makes Biden different is meron siyang democracy summit. Meron siyang democracy promotion agenda. My sense is if Biden wins another 4 years and Democrats do decently in the Congress and all, and I don't think Republicans will be entirely against promotion of democracy, although Trump is more comfortable with it. May epekto yan sa Pilipinas eh, di ba? Kasi ngayon, magandang relationship with the Philippines, but if there are concerns with human rights, yung nangyari kay Percy, if, extrajudicial killings, at some point, even if Biden doesn't talk or Kamala Harris doesn't talk, the U.S. Congress will talk or U.S. senators will talk. So that will still affect our bilateral relationship. And so the good governance agenda will be much more powerful in U.S. foreign policy. But I think if someone like Trump wins, it's going to be more transactional. Ano makuha ko sa Pilipinas, ano maibigay ko sa'yo, ano epekto ito sa aking laban with China or relations with Russia. So it's going to be very different. So my sense is a Democratic president will be much more ideological, much more concerned with democracy promotion. So that could create some complication 2-3 years down the road. And of course, what's going to happen in 2024 is already decided now. Biden is going to run. I doubt Biden will not run after this. He has done better than any Democrat since JFK, right? So I think he's going to run, even if medyo my concerns, you know. And Trump, well, Trump being Trump, he will take whatever credit he can take. He'll still run, right? So,
Yun ang tatanong ko sana sa'yo. You actually believe Trump will run again?
yes, but I don't think he will win. I think DeSantis has a good, strong case to make now that if you
Pero
look.
parang binibuild up nila si DeSantis din, di ba?
Exactly. I think DeSantis has a very strong argument now, which is why Trump attacking DeSantis now. Like, parang weird. I thought you're both in Florida, friendship, because they know they're threat to each other.
The primaries.
DeSantis is a guy who can be both Trumpian and establishment Republican. Meron siyang two sides na ganun. Trump is Trump, right? And what happened here is the red wave did not happen because the most extreme na pro-Trump, they got completely demolished, right? In places like Michigan, right? Mehmet Oz, super celebrity, right? Trump supported all. He lost to a guy who had a stroke 3 months ago, right? So my thing is, I think if you're DeSantis right now, you have a stronger case. And DeSantis is a very powerful supporter. Itago natin sa pangalan na Elon Musk na may-ari ng Twitter ngayon. So that's what I'm watching, the internal tensions within the Republican Party.
And Trump is still under investigation, ha? Pwede pa siyang ma-cancel out as a candidate. He's really
Di ba rumble yan?
serious.
Pagdating sa ganon, mataas ang paniwala ko kay Trump na he can get away with things. So I don't think he's going to get canceled. If they're going to beat Trump, they have to beat him in the primaries. It's not going to be easy, but it's increasingly doable based on what we're seeing right now. No, but I'm saying maybe we're just looking at DeSantis, but one person who won is J.D. Vance, the guy behind the Hillbilly Elegy, my Netflix series, has a very inspiring story. Comes from poverty, goes to Yale Law School. He has a minority, Asian American, I think. So I won't be surprised in 2 years, he's going to run for president, just like Obama. Obama, how many years was he in Senate before he ran? So may mga ibang stars pa sa Republican Party that we're not very aware of or not paying attention to. But if this DeSantis Trump gets crazy, there might be a third dark horse, third way party within the Republican Party. So actually naging exciting because nang hindi nangyari yung shellacking sa Democrats, Biden is going to run, Trump is going to run, but DeSantis is going to run, and it's going to create a very dynamic. And for me, bilang isang Pilipino na excited sa democracy, I want competition, I want democracy. What happens in the U.S. will have always a psychological impact on us, no? After all, our political system is a copycat of the American system. Let's not forget.
All this time, I thought that Trump was a given already for 2024.
But how competitive, right? Given na he'll run, but whether he'll be competitive, that's the big question. And I think now there's an argument for the others. I don't think he's canceled. I think he'll still run. I think he can be competitive. But can he secure it as smoothly as he thought 3 days ago? Kasi dapat today siya nag-announce, di ba? Or kahapon, yung original plan niya, kasi red wave. I don't know, there's nothing, right? So that means medyo nawala yung momentum niya. Oh, medyo sira yung momentum niya. Yeah. So that's why I'm watching.
Professor, you mentioned the China policy of the U.S. Is
Yes.
it an accurate perception na under the Republicans, magiging isolationist yung U.S.?
Yeah,
and
so-
will likely stay away from
Right.
this area. Hindi siya masyadong engaged in our part of the world.
Right. So the Trumpian wing of the Republican Party and the Bernie Sanders wing of the Democratic Party are both, you can call them neo-isolationists, right? More like America first, right? Of course, for Bernie Sanders, America first in the sense of protecting the interests of American middle class and workers. So ayaw nila ng free trade, right? Kabila naman, America first in the sense tayong alpha we'll get our way, di ba? So the challenge is for the Bidens who are in the middle, di ba? Because the Biden strategy is, we want to protect Americans, but we have to engage the world. To keep America safe, you have to keep the world safe for democracy. That's the Biden. So actually, you're right. One big fight later on will be globalist versus American first new isolationist, which, as I said, it's not only the Trump wing, but also the Bernie Sanders wing. Both of them represent that. Remember, the leftists tend to be the more isolationist, but now Trump is also along that line. So that's another thing I have to watch. Bakit tayo may pake? Kasi meron itong implications sa Philippines again, right? Because a Biden, in theory, is better for the Philippines. Because a Biden believes in integrated deterrence, meaning working with allies to keep the region safe. I'm not going to bully you to do what? We will work together so that we keep the region safe. If it's Trump, he might directly deal with the Chinese and just cut out everyone else. It will be very, very different. Or if it's Bernie Sanders, he might say, well, I'm not sure we'll have to fight with China. We have to protect jobs here. I don't like war. I don't like militarism. Let's cut the budget of Pentagon. You get what I'm saying? So as I said, I think Marcos Jr., he's quite a charming leader. I mean, you can see how he deals with foreign leaders, businessmen, very different from President Duterte, right? Let's just, for an understatement. But I think maging sobrang malaki yung change in the trajectory of American foreign policy depending on who wins, Trump, Biden, or Bernie Sanders, or who know what. Because Biden might also be challenged in a primary if he runs, because there are concerns about how much stamina and everything else, right? And he's very unpopular. He's at 40%. So let's see, maging exciting American democracy. And for me, that means buhay pang demokrasya sa America, which is supposed to be the beacon for democracy across the world. So that's good. For me, there's inspiration. Otherwise, puro China-Russia lang ang pag-usapan natin dito, di ba?
Okay.
Who can deal better with Russia, for example?
Yeah,
Dahil ang isang sinasabi nila, hindi tayo maghihirap masyadong ganito if we are friendlier toward Moscow. There is that faction there.
Yeah, I think Filipinos who think the war should stop and Ukraine should make a concession na para the war stops, para all of, they would like the more extreme Republicans to win. Because a lot of extreme Republicans, a lot of them won, they want to stop the aid to Ukraine. Their idea is that we provoke Russia. So it's quite interesting, right? Which is not what you expect from... But the more extreme Republican, the Trumpian ones...
What you'd expect from di ba?
Exactly. But it turned there. Now the Bidens are tough on Russia, but actually they're not as well. But on China, I think there's more bipartisan consensus. Because I think ganito kasi, the Democrats are essentially, the Bidens are saying we can fight two-front war, both Russia and China. But some Republicans are saying, let's make friends with Russia, and cut the deal on Ukraine, focus tayo sa China. That's a big debate. That's a big debate that's not going to go away anytime soon, yeah.
Okay.
Siyempre tayo gusto natin China rin yung focus, di ba?
Teka, kabilang tayo. ASEAN, any surprises?
Oh, yeah.
Bongbong was hoping to be able to bring up several issues, including yung sa
Code of Conduct.
Sa West Philippine Sea.
Right.
Pero wala.
Well, I mean, 2 days ago, we had this talk again, right? Very spirited one. I said, ang gusto ni Marcos is, first of all, talk about business and trade and investment, right? Which was very much dominant. And in the meeting he had with the Prime Minister Pham of Vietnam, mahalaga remember, he's also the Agriculture Secretary. And Vietnam is source of 85% of our rice. So ang laki nung yung kalagaan ng Vietnam sa atin when it comes to our food security and G2G deals that we want to do to bring down yung prices of agriculture, inputs, etc. So totally unsurprising. He's focused on that. Now, nonetheless, he has raised South China. In fairness kay President Marcos Jr., at least he ticks the box. Unlike President Duterte, sometimes even the box disappears, right? But with Marcos Jr., at least he ticks the box. Now, para sa akin naman, we didn't have a time to discuss that in another show we had kanina, but the thing is, actually our relationship with Vietnam was a little bit alanganin nung panahon ni President Duterte because he was very close to China. During Aquino, we were super close to Vietnam.
Yeah, the Vietnam, yeah.
Against China. With Marcos, interesting, I think it's open. So, diba, inimbita na siya sa Vietnam. So, I think with Vietnam, we can build a strong bilateral relationship. Because, yes, Vietnam controls a lot in the West Philippine Sea, pero hindi na siya overlapping with us. Hindi na. Meaning, it's not 1970s. Yes, may mga nakuha. So,
parang settled din.
Vietnam kasi once united front against China. Yun ang gusto nila. So, tingnan natin if Marcos is more open to that because Duterte was not. Alam ko, pinapatapos na tayo ng producers. Ang daldal ko naman. Well, ininbitan niyo ako in person na So, wala nang mga internet lag. Pasensya na.
Ami, pahabol ka.
Sorry,
Okay
Ami.
na.
Sabi mo na, kaya mo yan. Tama yan.
Okay na.
And what were you saying? Very spirited discussions.
Yeah. Sabi ng iba, bakit pag nasa The Chiefs ka, ganyan ka parang, you're not your professionals. No, I'm just kidding. No, you're more spirited, considering it's 9:10 p.m. almost, right? So I said, masaya kasi mga kausap natin. Yeah.
Okay, Professor Richard Heydarian, one of the chiefs na actually. Maraming salamat
self-promoted as co-host. Yeah.
Maraming salamat for joining us tonight and being here in the studio. And
Thanks,
that's it for the Chiefs. We hope to discuss it. We'll keep the conversation going. I'm Ed Lingao.
I'm Mami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star.
We are One News, all sides, all the time.